Hello and welcome everyone at a new episode of the Pure Gospel on the Flat Earth. My name is Icke and today we're going to talk about the fear of God. In today's video we will show you how the fear of God can be the solution of all kinds of problems that we see going on right now in this world. In the previous episode we talked about a strong delusion and how this COVID scam and all kinds of other fabricated crises can serve as ways to manipulate people, but also how they can constitute an indirect judgment over apathic, selfish people. And today we will talk about how this relates to the fear of God. It's important to know that the fear of God doesn't mean that we are just only afraid of God and want to run away from Him, but it's actually meant to draw us near to God. It means that we are revering Him, that we are in awe of Him, that we love Him, that we want to know His purpose for this world and for our lives, and these kind of things. And it will also make that we think about how we act in His sight, basically. And it's very important to know this, and according to the Bible, this is the beginning of wisdom. In Proverbs 1 verse 7 we read that it's very foolish to not have a fear of God. So let's go to this text right now. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So where does this lead to? One cannot get rid of fear. People will always have fear. They will always keep it. But what happens when someone does away with the fear of God and becomes self-absorbed and relativistic? Basically, they see themselves, set themselves at the standard of everything. Well, what happens then is that this fear of God will be replaced by all kinds of irrational fears.
Fear of the Lord removes every other fear. Fear of the Lord gives you freedom not to panic, not to be timid, and not to be terrified. Fear of the Lord is amazing because fear of the Lord, especially at this hour, frees us. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10 verse 28, He says, "Do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear Him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell." Every person watching us right now and sitting in this room will have fear in their life. We just have to choose which fear we're going to have. You will never be able to live without fear, my friend, mark my words. You will just have to choose which fear you want to have. You can have a fear of the Lord or fear of being single all your life. You can have fear of the Lord or fear of bankruptcy. You can have fear of the Lord or fear of cancer. You can have fear of the Lord or fear of COVID. You can have fear of the Lord or fear of being rejected, the fear of never utilizing your dreams, the fear of not being accepted. You can choose your fear, my friend, but it's not possible to remove fear. You can only replace it. And it's time to put fear in its place. Put the right fear in our life so that we walk with the fear of the Lord. Does that mean that all other things don't matter? Does that mean that we are reckless? Does that mean that we walk through the valley of the shadow of death with a smile on our face? Sometimes no, but we fear no evil. That's why the Lord says 365 times, do not be afraid, do not fear. But the same God says the reason why we can not be afraid of everything else around us is because we have a greater fear that consumes all other fears.
Fears which God not intended to be there. That He did not want us to be slaves from these kind of fears. You know, He wants us to be busy in His plan, which keeps everything in perspective, basically. If this fear of God, which should keep everything in proper perspective, is not there anymore, then we get all kind of chaos and irrational fears. And then we see also that other people, they can easily appeal to these fears. And that is what we see right now going on with this COVID scam. which is used by the governments basically to manipulate the people and to suppress them.
Is problem, reaction, solution, where you covertly create a problem, you use the unquestioning, pathetic mainstream media to tell the public the version of the problem you want them to believe. And you're looking at stage 2, the reaction, for fear, that's the currency of control, outrage, whatever the problem is, and either a demand from the public that something must be done, or at least an acceptance from the public that things need to change because of the problem. And at that point, those who've created the problem got that reaction openly in changes in society, offer the solutions to the problems they have themselves covertly created. And those changes, step by step, take us further and further to that Hunger Games society. There's another version, which I call no problem reaction solution, where you don't need a real problem, you just need the perception of one, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and you still have the ability to provide your society-changing solution. The stablemate of problem reaction solution is what I call the totalitarian tiptoe, where you start at A and you know you're going to Z, but you know if you go in too big a leap, people will look up from the game show and the latest Simon Cowell and say, what's going on, because the change is so great. So you do it in as big a steps as you can towards your outcome, but not so fast or big that you alert too many people to the fact that it's a pattern. What you want people to believe is everything is random.
Secret societies, they use their problem, reaction, solution method, or chaos out of order method, to appeal to this fear and to socially engineer societies. So that is the problem basically. When someone gets rid of the fear of God, then he becomes susceptible to social engineering. And right now we see all the disastrous consequences that it brings with it. So we see that people take some kind of experimental shot, and many of them actually die. So this is very sad, but that is the indirect result of people fearing death basically, and not fearing God. Because if they really fear God, they're gonna think first, they're gonna analyze the data, they're gonna think if a certain story makes sense. They're not gonna freak out and call for some kind of authority to save them, but that is what is happening right now. Most people, they live that way, and probably people are too proud to admit this, but I see this all around me. What will also happen is that deep inside they know that they've done things wrong, just like me. Everyone has done things wrong. By the way, we can also read about this in the book of Romans. People deep inside realize that they have sinned, that they have done wrong, and that justice needs to be done, and that they deserve punishment. And this kind of reinforces the fear they already have, I think.
Are you doing anything that you think could be offensive to God, that could anger Him?
No.
Looking at pornography?
Doesn't everybody?
Yeah, do you?
Well, I'm not gonna go ahead and lie, so I mean every once in a while.
You having sex before marriage?
Yeah.
Have you lied and stolen?
Lied for not, yeah.
Have you used God's name in vain?
Well, I more for the expression. I really don't, like, whenever I do say it, I don't mean like offend anybody by it.
Romans 3 verse 19 says, "Now we know that whatsoever things the law says, it says to them who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped, and the whole world become guilty before God."
You might think during this time, during this life, people will get away with things, but at least at Judgment Day, people will not get away with anything. And we can read about judgment, for instance, in Romans 3 verse 19 up to 24. Now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be silenced and the whole world held accountable to God. Therefore no one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law. Rather, through the law we become conscious of our sin. But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. This righteousness is given through faith in Yeshua Christ to all who believe. There is no difference between Jew and Gentile, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and all are justified freely by His grace through the redemption that came by Christ Yeshua. Right now I want to point out that there are many people who profess themselves being Christian, but they don't really have a reverence for God.
My problem, personally, that I see among Christians today, myself included, many of us have a relationship with God. We lack reverence for Him. We're going to heaven, but living in hell. We flirt with sin instead of fleeing sin. We can speak in tongues 300 miles per hour. And our lives many times don't resemble any different than the people we work with and the people that we hang out with for. And it's not that we don't have a relationship with God. It's that we lack reverence for the God we have a relationship with.
And this also basically means that they are not real followers of Christ. They are not real believers basically, or they will not be justified. You know, if you don't treat God's judgment serious, if you don't treat Him serious, then you don't treat His Son serious, you don't treat grace serious, and this will automatically mean that you're just lying basically. You're lying to yourself, you're lying to others about what you're standing for. And we see this often in how people live day by day. They do all kinds of things that God forbid, and they don't treat God serious. They talk over their sins. So we should not take him lightly. We can read about Paul talking to the Jews in his time, and he says that the Jews, they saw themselves as a light to the Gentiles, to these people who lived in a disgusting way. They had orgies, they were sexually immoral, they were drinking too much, they were superficial, hedonistic, just chasing their own lust and longing after money, being addicted to money, all these kind of vices that we acknowledge that they are vices, and we see them right now also in these days. And when I think about them, obviously I despise this kind of behavior, but on the other hand, you need to be invitative, you need to give people an invitation to get rid of it and to improve their lives and to live from grace, to acknowledge that you've done things wrong and that you need to live from grace, that you deserve punishment, and this applies to me as just as it applies to everyone else, and that we need to live from the grace of God, basically, provided to us via His Son, Christ Yeshua. And this will then also help us to get rid of the fear of death. It will liberate us, free us from the fear of death, as we can read, for instance, in Hebrews 2 verse 14 and 15. Since the children have flesh and blood, He too shed in their humanity, so that by His death He might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. Once we start to live from grace via Christ and start following Him, then we will get rid of all these irrational, nonsensical fears. We will gain some real understanding of what's going on in this world and how deceived the world is and how the devil tempts everyone into sin. And get people in his plan, basically in the plan of the Antichrist, and how he uses social engineering for this. So hopefully you understand right now what is going on. Many people profess themselves to be Christians, but they still have all kinds of idols, like the Trinity idol, and then they talk over it and want to say, oh yeah, it's a matter of perspective or whatever, and they smuggle in relativism basically in some kind of way. Well, God is not to be mocked. We need to treat God very serious. If you think that way, then you don't have a fear of God, and just think for yourself what this then will mean for your state of salvation. So it's important to develop this fear of God, and this is my encouragement for you. So there you have it for today. Let us stop lying to others, lying to ourselves. Let us become vulnerable. Let us also build one another up. Let us be gracious to one another, because we need to have live from grace ourselves. So this is our message for today, and let's get rid of all these irrational fears. Fear the Lord, fear the Most High and His Son. There you have it for today. Thank you all for watching. We hope to see you in another episode of Pure Gospel on the Flat Earth.